Okay, it's 3 minutes past, so we'll get started. Thank you for your patience, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm Mike Nugent. I head up global sales and delivery for Hitachi ZeroCarbon. I'm joined by my colleague Leon Clarke, who's our head of operations. He's going to be talking you through how we're actually delivering on our battery charging and management services, and I'm going to introduce the whole concept and what we're doing, and give a little bit of flavour around what we're doing with First Bus with our recently announced agreement and partnership with them. Just to let you know, we'll be taking questions through the chat all the way through the session. So please put your questions in, and we'll then cover that off after both myself and Leon have spoken. We're going to be about 15 minutes each, talking through what we've done and how we deliver. And just to let you know that this webinar is being recorded. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit around how we see the challenge facing fleets. And actually how we've structured our services based on what we've seen. We see some really great solutions out there in terms of as a service and battery as a service deals. We have a slightly different viewpoint with regards to that, and I'll talk you through that. We'll talk you through exactly what our battery charging and management services are and why we think that's the right answer to the operational and electrification and residual value challenges in the market. Why we see that as benefits to yourself, and then I'm going to hand over to Leon, who's going to talk through how we actually deliver for our clients and the types of solutions that we've put in place. And as I said, I'll probably be about 15 minutes, then another 15 minutes from Leon, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the session to conclude and to take any questions. So let's talk about the challenge then. So I think when we talk about the challenge, what we've seen in terms of deployments of electrified fleets, whether that be buses, light commercial vehicles, and now EHGVs, a lot of the time we see it seen as quite a siloed set of activities, both in terms of from a temporal perspective and also in terms of the actual aspects of the deployment. So from a temporal perspective, a lot of focus is all on the putting in place the hardware and the software, and it's all about deployment, but not really a lot of focus on then, well, how do we make sure this is successful from a delivery perspective? And then the second part is from the perspective that we often see infrastructure is seen as a procurement objective. So infrastructure is then procured, and then we buy some chargers, and then we buy some vehicles, and our contention is that ultimately what we're talking about here is a systemic change. We're moving from a fuel-based, a liquid fossil fuel-based type solution to an electrified solution, which actually means that the whole system is changed. That presents its own challenges in that there's a whole lot of integration that needs to be done across diverse pieces of equipment and diverse software. But it also presents a challenge in terms of the operations and the issue resolution. And one of my key points around this, and the key points we've made as a business, is that the more differences in touch points that you create with regards to different pieces of hardware, charging, different types of OEMs of vehicles, different battery types, the more touch points you create arithmetically, when it comes to answering the question, why hasn't my fleet charged? Why hasn't my vehicle charged? Actually, unresolving that becomes a geometrically complex challenge when you've got lots of different pieces of kit, lots of different pieces of software. And just looking at as well, we need to get a charging optimization solution, and we need to have something that's looking after our batteries separately is the wrong way to approach it. You need to look at this in terms of a holistic approach and thinking about how all of this fits together so that you can ultimately deliver what you need to deliver as a business, which is making sure your vehicles have sufficient charge to deliver their services on a day-to-day basis. And so thinking about this from a systemic point of view, we see as being absolutely critical. But equally, we recognise that it's an ideal world when you're dealing with a greenfield. You've got a completely new depot, or you've not tried out pilots with different pieces of hardware and software. So we say, okay, we understand that it's complex. We understand that it's going to be difficult to provide a single pane of glass, but that's what we do, and we can provide that single viewpoint of that system, by taking, we take all of that complexity of lots of different pieces of hardware and software, and we simplify it into that single pane of glass. That's a key part of our proposition. And then we layer on top of that our services to actually support the delivery and ensuring that the vehicles leave the depot with sufficient charge in the morning. So that's kind of a broad picture of how we see the challenges facing the market. One of complexity, one of multiple solutions. We don't believe in telling organizations what solutions from a hardware and software perspective they should put in, because we know that over time different solutions are going to come in place. But we'll take that complexity of integrating interoperability testing, deployment and running that alongside our partners, as in First Bus, as an example, to actually make sure that it works and that we're then caring and protecting the battery through that process. That's the overall concept. So if we were to then sort of think about the challenges then facing fleet, we've broken it down into 3 key questions. How do I meet my decarb targets? It's getting increasingly difficult as capital is becoming more scarce. So raising the money and making sure that access to a low cost of capital and meeting those targets is critical. Second question that we're focused on answering is, how do I ensure uninterrupted operations? That's what Leon's going to talk to you a lot more about, is how we actually make sure that we can look at the system, diagnose any root causes of any issues very, very quickly, and make sure that we can get vehicles out the door. And that's a big challenge for anybody that is probably a little bit ignored at the moment, because everybody's focused on the deployment. But actually, as we're seeing in the light commercial vehicle market, which is maybe a bit more advanced in terms of deployment to the bus fleet market, there are beginning to be some pretty big challenges, because there are lots of different pieces of kit not talking to each other, concerns around battery life, concerns around temperature and state of charge are beginning to really become quite prevalent. So how do I ensure uninterrupted operations is actually a critical factor. And then most crucially, and something that really isn't thought about a lot, is the opportunity that is coming from the electrification piece. Fleets are going to become large mobile storage providers. They can utilize that as we move more into V2G, and as we think more about the grid and how you can optimize and do capacity planning and even trading into the grid. That's a new revenue stream. But the only way that you can really exploit that new revenue stream is by making sure that there is a balance between the operational need, but also making sure that you're controlling both the charging and protecting the battery. So if we then go to our solution, we're focused on exactly how do you bring all of this together. So it is the combination of battery charging and battery management services, BCMS, battery charging and management services. And ultimately what we are is a managed service. We work in partnership with organizations to deliver that charge. The first and foremost objective of our business is to make sure the vehicles are delivered in the morning or whenever, or the beginning of their shift, with sufficient charge to deliver their services. That's our prime objective. But then underneath that, how do we maximize the value from the charging point of view in terms of any potential revenue streams or avoidance, effective avoidance of high tariff periods, as well as selling energy back to the grid. But also, how do we then make sure that we're protecting the battery and extending the life of that battery? So we're all about how we can enhance the battery performance. We want to ensure that the batteries are charged effectively. We will then, and we are perfectly happy to then link ourselves to the service levels requirements of our operating partners, and we're all about then making sure that we're delivering business continuity and making sure that the vehicles are charged effectively through that service. That is battery charging and management services. And and to do that, you need to not just think, well, I just need a simple piece of software which either optimizes charging, or a simple piece of software that gives me opportunity to sell energy to the grid, or a simple piece of software and hardware that makes sure I can then extend the life of my battery. You've got to think about this all in the round and in the whole, and that's what battery charging and management services is all about. It's about making sure that you're thinking about all of those different things at the same time. So we deliver accelerated fleet electrification So one of the key things that we'll talk about with regards to first bus is that through Hitachi's a big name, obviously very high credit rating. So we do have access to low cost of capital and access to Japanese bank and finances. But that's only one part of the equation. By providing our managed service and our assurance of the operations, we can access even lower cost of capital. Because we're making it more attractive to people who want to invest in batteries and in that risky asset, that actually that asset is being protected. We're collecting data on that asset all the way through its life. We're extending beyond warranty periods, and we're making sure that there's a big opportunity for the asset owner, which tends to be in the first bus instance is actually co-owned between ourselves and First Group. We're going to get a benefit in terms of extending the life of that battery through the residual value. Most importantly, of course, is making sure that we're delivering resilient and assured EV operations. So there's a safety aspect here, of course, in terms of avoidance of battery fires, avoidance of charger failures, etc. But it's also about making sure that we're delivering the sufficient charge for the services. And then really critically, and opening the eyes to the opportunity that those gigawatts of storage that are actually held within all of those batteries, whether they be in the depot or in the field, but they're mobile storage. How do we exploit the opportunity of that storage selling power back to the grid, but also then not degrading the battery and making it maybe at the later years of the battery life a little bit more sketchy in terms of whether the state of health of the battery is going to last for the full period. But also we're keeping an audit trail of how those batteries are being managed over the life. So if there is a warranty claim, we can prove that those batteries have been kept within warranty. And then we get to the magic triangle of if you've got battery charging and battery management both together, you're thinking about all of those things. We're creating a balance between three critical things. The first and foremost, the must-have is operational resilience, making sure that those vehicles have sufficient charge to leave the depot for their shift. But then we start thinking about, well, what are the trade-offs that are that we can see in terms of maybe exploiting that battery for short-term revenue streams with the energy trading, the grid integration type work, and how we can do capacity planning, and maybe run a few more duty cycles on those batteries than perhaps you would want to, but balancing that against the operational resilience and the state of health, the long-term state of health of those batteries. So that creates some short-term revenue streams, which obviously have a high net present value. But then the opportunity in the longer term is through long-term revenue realization, the end of life of that battery. What could it be used for in extended first life? So extending the life of the battery beyond the warranty period and beyond the point at which it's been depreciated down to zero. That's a huge potential benefit for operational organizations. But also, what could that battery then be used for in its second life? Or sold on to other first life applications, maybe for shorter routes, smaller, lighter vehicles, because the power is still there. It's just the capacity is down. So what we're doing and what we do as a business is we're balancing those three aspects constantly. We're using our data science team to assess and balance between new technologies and the right point at which we could replace batteries, the life of that existing battery and any issues that might be coming through at a cell level that may mean that battery may or may not last the full life. So how do you manage that battery out effectively or extend its life if it's actually a more beneficial battery chemistry that looks like it's going to last longer? And then balancing that off against any potential residual value outturn. So it's about trying to maximize the revenue opportunity of that battery. And the only way that you can really manage that is by managing the flow of the electron from an end-to-end point of view, from the charging and getting the power into the electron into the battery and then out of the battery, and how that's being managed through driver behavior, through environmental conditions, through geographic conditions, which may be affecting that life of that battery. We balance those three. That is what battery charging and management services is all about. And really just wrapping up my bit pretty shortly now, in terms of what we're thinking about the battery, just to bring that to life. We believe that we can extend battery life quite significantly through our assurance services and through this managed services. That's obviously got a huge balance sheet impact. for the operational organisation, but it also has a significant operational impact. The more that we can avoid significant degradation of the state of health of those batteries over the warranty period, the more reliable and the more options you have for using batteries on longer routes and maintaining those batteries in service, and avoiding short-term failures of batteries through essentially condition-based monitoring, which is what we're doing all the time through the data. So we want to move that curve out as far as we possibly can, but also understand at which point that fall off, that cliff face is going to be, and how that might affect different chemistries, how that might be affected by different climate conditions, and how we can really drive better performance and better outcome from a revenue perspective around those batteries. So let's talk a little bit about First Bus. So we're partnered with the whole of First Group on this organisation, on this opportunity, and we're working. This is the world's largest single battery service deal, which we're very, very proud of. For those that don't know First Group, they've got 4,500 buses around 60 depots across the United Kingdom. And they have a commitment to decarbonise their entire fleet by 2035, and they're pretty well at the point at which they will no longer be buying any diesel buses. They're driving forward with a full electrified fleet across their business. What we've done is we've joined with First Group we've gone in with an equity and debt play with regards to owning the batteries, and that's currently at 1,000 bus batteries. But the service that I've just described is actually for 1,500 buses. So we'll go beyond the agreement for the actual financing of those batteries. As I said, we've been able to access a very low cost of capital. And that has been partly because of our relationships, our AAA star credit rating as an organisation, but also through the very clear fact that we are providing a significant level of transparency on how those batteries are being managed over the life, and with the view that we can extend and deliver a significantly higher residual value on those batteries, realising that residual value is either selling on the open market, as I said, or through extended life of that battery, or through extended operation in different services or into other organisations. So it's a significant deal. It's for 8 + 2 years. So we're looking to at least increase the life of those batteries by 20% from an 8-year model to a 10-year model, and both organisations that have invested in those batteries will benefit through the outturn of that extended life of those batteries. A really exciting deal, but the only way that we can really make that work is by delivering an amazing operation through a significantly knowledgeable, capable, and excellent team that is headed up by Leon. So I'm going to hand over to Leon, who'll talk to you about how we're actually delivering this.
Thanks, Mike. Good morning, everyone. I'm Leon Clarke, Head of Operations for ZeroCarbon, and as Mike says, my team manage the client deployments, and we manage the service throughout with the client. So we handhold you throughout every aspect of this service. So today I just want to talk about a couple of things. So really bring to life what Mike's just talked about in terms of what we deliver under BCMS, and then how we deliver it as well. So working with the teams on the ground and any other third parties as well. And then lastly, I want to bring this to life using a couple of case studies, one of which Mike's already talked about, which is First Bus, which I would sort of term a greenfield opportunity where we're deploying our service into a new site infrastructure after it's been deployed. And then the secondly is another client, Post and Bring in Norway, where we're deploying to a brownfield opportunity, which is we're deploying our solution into an existing site, an established infrastructure, and mixture of vehicles and charges as well. And so we'll talk about how we've negotiated that, the challenges and the benefits that the client hopefully has seen as well. So in terms of what BCMS is, Mike's touched on a lot of this already, so I'm not going to go into these three areas in any great detail for the moment because he's touched on that. But BCMS is our top tier solution, and essentially it's helping you to manage the operational and financial risks of transitioning your fleet to electric. We provide the support, the advice, the solution and the finance options to help you to simplify and decarbonise your journey. Paramount to me and the team is that we take a customer-centric approach. to integrate in your service, our service, with any pre-existing or new suppliers that you may have through buses and charge point providers that are on the ground. And importantly, from a contracting perspective, this is backed up by SLAs that provide assurance that we're focused on ensuring that you get the availability of vehicles and they're able to fulfill their daily operations 24/7, 365 days a year. So the components of BCMS, as the slide's saying, is the technology providing a single pane of glass for us to monitor and optimize the charging across your depots, a fully managed service, which is essentially hand-holding and supporting across all stages of planning, the deployment, and then into BAU as well. And then in financing, for any ops directors out there, well aware that investment in operations is usually a conversation with your FD or your CFO, who ultimately scratches their head on that. But as Mike said, we can offer low cost of capital finance, but also importantly, touching on the financial point, the managed service that we provide, as Mike has also said, can then help to enhance the asset residual value as well, and hopefully extend the service life of those batteries, presenting longer term benefits for you as well. The assurances that we can provide through battery monitoring to the batteries have been managed within the warranty and conditions, but also last but not least, the revenue generation opportunities or saving opportunities that we can enable or unlock through the fully managed service as well are quite important and significant, and we've seen some of those examples with our existing customers. So on to the next stage of how we deliver BCMS, or what's in the scope of BCMS and how we deliver that. So this slide summarizes what is in the scope of BCMS, and the first stage of commissioning is very important, and we spend a lot of time on this because it helps us to set the configuration and optimization of charging within the operations and the site or sites that we have to cover as well. So I'm not going to go into every detail on every component, but essentially the site audit is how we understand your site infrastructure, including the electrical components, the cabling, the site layout, and all that then helps to inform the configuration of our charging management platform, ZeroCarbon Charge. Interoperability testing, which is part of that, which is about how we test the combination of bus, charger, and the charging management system. So without going into great level of detail, we spend a lot of time ensuring before we can get to site of testing the interoperability between our charging software and our platform and the charger types that you'll have in the depots. Then we also, when we deploy to site or when we're live on site, we will test the combination of charger, bus, and the charger management platform as well. All makes and models, all types, before that solution is deployed live as well. And it's important to do that because that's the assurance that we have that the complete charging ecosystem is communicating well. We're able to optimize the charging with all the settings required, and also the assurance that we're managing the assets that will be under our control as well. Any change in that configuration, so if there's a new model of bus that's introduced or a new model of charger, we will retest and make sure that it's interoperable and it's communicating and working effectively with the ecosystem. Smart charging, which is our technology platform, which we use to control the behaviours of the charge points and the charge management. So load management to protect the infrastructure and ensure the buses are charged for the next day of operations. I've mentioned a single pane of glass to monitor all the charging operations, the vehicles and the batteries. Data management and alerting that comes through the platform as well. Through our facility view functionality on the platform, you get a single pane of glass as to where all your vehicles are, the state of charge of the vehicles, and the status of those vehicles as well. So overview of all operations within the depot and all buses as well. Battery services is sort of self-explanatory really. This is how we manage and monitor your batteries, the important aspect of the data coming in from the buses, and the charging management or the chargers as well, that we're monitoring the performance of those batteries and looking for any signs of early degradation, but also using that to formulate any recommendations on how we can improve the battery life and elongate it as well. Telematics, which is important, I'm not going to go into, but again, you can have a choice of onboard telematics, which you've got, or we can provide the aftermarket solutions, or you may have an aftermarket solution that we need to do and integrate with. So we can do all of that and integrate that with our platform as well. The important point that this is all underpinned by a proactive managed charging service. So this is where we add the value beyond the technology. So it's the business as usual management of the charging, preventative maintenance, we're spotting any issues, identifying issues early, alerting, and then making any recommended changes. It's the configuration, the reconfiguration, as I mentioned, any incident management, the software support, and all that's provided by a team that's internal to us that provides 24/7 support 365 days a year. We also provide analytics, insights, and reporting as well as part of that DCMS service. So the next slide goes into just how, on a practical level, how we do this, and this is purely illustrative. Obviously, it will depend very on the, it will vary depending on the complexity of that deployment itself. But it's all those stages put into a mini sort of Gantt chart as well. So this, I suppose, the point to make here is that we will always work with the teams on the ground, so the engineering teams, any relevant third parties, so the charger OEM, the bus OEM, make sure that everybody's involved in those early stages of site of this depot setup and the interoperability testing. Training was mentioned in the chat, and training is important. It's much as training about how we use our platform and the functionality that's available to the end user, but also how we manage the charging in the depot as well. So that's being clear on escalation routes through to us, and what's a priority, and therefore then courses of action. So we will act as a single point of contact for all aspects of charging. So that, whether that's anything that results in a vehicle not charging correctly or any anomalies, we will then take that and then triage or investigate and follow that up with the relevant OEM if it's not a software matter. So everything comes through training, and it's being clear, but for all parties to be clear what their roles are, what the limitations are on the ground in terms of the charging limits and ceiling limits as well, but also next steps to ensure that we're all joined up in our actions going forward. So next slide, we'll talk about the benefits of delivering to customers as well. So using those examples. So First Bus, which I've mentioned, is a greenfield site, and Mike's talked about, I suppose, the scale of First Bus. So they are one of the UK's largest bus operators. We're operating at the moment in the Caledonia depot and have been for the last few years, which is the largest rapid EV charging hub in the UK, where we have 150 buses under our management. We've just mobilised in the Leicester depot with an additional 72 buses, and we'll continue on to onboard the additional depots before the end of June. One important aspect, and all those services that we mentioned there in terms that I previously mentioned in terms of the BCMS setup are being delivered in those depots at the moment, from commissioning all the way to BAU support. Additionally, in Caledonia, we've also enabled B2B charging, where First Bus have given access to certain last mile delivery companies to charge their vehicles, and thereby they're enabled to generate an income and generate revenue from those opportunities. But we've learned a lot from that deployment in that initial depot, and we always take that forward to the learnings of each depot, where there's different configuration of chargers, buses, their infrastructure as well. We take that learning through, and we make that, we bring that to the next deployment that we have as well. So in terms of examples, I'll move on to the first example of how we've demonstrated our benefit to First Bus here. So the first one is around battery performance. And this is important to say, this is our managed service stepping in here. So this is the value of using the data and analysis of charging activity for our team to step in at crucial times and really acting on behalf of, in this case, First Bus, to escalate issues early, and therefore avoid them becoming material issues that impact the operations of the buses for their service next day. So in this one, our battery monitoring identified a downward trend in the battery capacity on both single and double decker buses, which was greater than we'd expect to see for a battery in its early stage of life, and therefore could be indicating signs of battery degradation. We raised this with the battery OEM, as it had the potential to impact on the performance of the buses, and therefore result in a degradation of service overall. So following that, there was an inspection of all batteries. So the battery OEM conducted an inspection of all the batteries, and then concluded that the issue was with the BMS rather than the battery degradation, and then conducted a recalibration of all the batteries, which then, following that, saw a return to the expected performance and range for both single and double decker buses. And we continue to monitor that all the way through. But again, a prime example of an early intervention, which is being led by the data that we're seeing, resulting, our analysis is, that's anomalous because it shouldn't be happening in its early stage, then resulting in an intervention that's helped to correct it and therefore protect the health of the battery and hopefully extend the life of those batteries as well. So that's one example. The second example of our team spotting, or the service spotting abnormalities, is relating to hardware. So again, we spotted an abnormality in the charging, one of the chargers on a dual charging unit, whereby there's a power fluctuation. So you can see on the graph there, that's not normal. The power should be steady all the way through at the set point, but there are erratic fluctuations in power. So we raised this with the charger OEM, who identified a fault on the charger itself, its internal ventilation, and then they corrected that through reactive maintenance. And on correcting that, the charger was brought back online and performed well. So a couple of the points here, which in terms of the importance of this, which is that one is a single point of contact for escalating and charging issues across the ecosystem. So that's us. We take that point. Secondly is the behind the scene proactive monitoring. So maintaining the uptime of the infrastructure is important, and the availability of the chargers. So the early intervention here helped to rectify the problem and ensure that charger wasn't out of service for a significant period of time and allowed to impact the operations. And then thirdly, protecting the battery health and maintaining the warranty conditions. So those fluctuations will have an impact if it was allowed to continue on for an extended period of time on the battery, and certainly wouldn't have been covered under the warranty condition as well. So early intervention, data-led, and protecting the life of the battery there as well. So that's first bus. On the other hand, there's another example, a brownfield client, where in Poston, we're operating in a situation or on a couple of sites where there are existing charging infrastructure. And so for those who don't know, Poston Bring, there are equivalent of the Royal Mail, so a delivery company operating across Norway, many depots. So far, we have 161 depots, 161 vehicles under our management across 2 depots. And so in that, we have a mixed vehicle fleet, which has been procured already, and chargers, mixed types and models of chargers before we deployed our charging management service there. We started working with Poston last year, and we've helped them to manage their charging through, I suppose, 2 things. One is their busiest period for postal delivery companies, which is over the Christmas period as well, but also one of the coldest periods they've experienced as well. So I think the team were over there beginning of December, and the temperatures were down to -14, and I think they continue to drop over the Christmas period as well. So a couple of challenges in that situation, which is, one is to quickly evaluate and understand Poston's operations and their requirements, so the infrastructure and vehicles. And although that equipment was already in place, we were able to conduct an early evaluation of their electrical equipment and advise on certain components that were either not fit for use or lacked certain resilience for their charging requirements as well. So early interventions there. But also they had a mix of single phase and 3-phase chargers on site. So we're able to advise them on how to allocate and match the vehicles to the single phase or 3-phase chargers, and therefore improve the charging efficiency almost immediately as well. So early advice and recommendations to optimize the charging given the mix on the site, and then deploying our solution with multiple charge types and multiple vehicle types in operation. So our software is, our technology is hardware agnostic. And as I mentioned before, we test all the interoperability with the chargers and with the components of hardware ahead of site and also when we're on site as well. So it's the assurance that we provide of testing each component despite the mix that we had on the site as well. We also make all the back-end configurations across all asset types to ensure the chargers are working to the agreed set points and are delivering the required power as well. In addition to that, the value is that we have the single pane of glass, the dashboard, where in Poston they can see a real-time view of their charging operations and the locations of the vehicles on the site. We can also interrogate historical data. And again, that 24/7 help desk coverage and that single point of contact for all charging issues, helping to protect their fleet, their batteries, and it's providing oversight and of their charging operations, but also alerts and resolution as and when necessary across their charging ecosystem as well. A specific example in the case of Poston is in Norway, their tariffs vary quite significantly between peak and off-peak periods, between the morning and evening periods as well. And so for them, it's all important that they're able to, I suppose, use a technology-driven and data-driven approach to minimize the cost impacts on the business, but also ensure that they can get their business out. So, our peak reduction functionality is a great example of how we've helped Poston to optimize their charging for cost and operational effects. And so the solution is the challenge is the tariff situation. We've then managed to resolve that by implementing peak reduction using our platform, so that we're charging or we're not charging during the peak hours of 4 to 6 p.m. and then we're shifting the demand to a later time to take advantage of cheaper tariffs as well. And so the challenges I've mentioned is deploying that across different charger types and vehicles which have different charging rates, but also we know that those vehicles need to be charged by a defined period in time, which is 6 a.m. in the morning, but also the variable that some of those vehicles don't return to the depot when we'd like them to. So, we've demonstrated that can work. It has worked effectively, and we've managed to save Poston money in deploying that or peak, shifting that peak to less costly periods of time as well. So I suppose to summarize, those are the two examples. BCMS can really offer you as a customer enhanced business continuity with proactive management, and builds on our learned experience from other customers each time the deployment improves as we learn more on that one. The battery insights and managed service can unlock those additional value points, which I've referenced as well. Our interoperability of the solution enables integration with all hardware providers and the buses as well. And there's a significant opportunity, as we've demonstrated with Poston, to save costs as well, but also generate revenue as we've done with First Bus. So it's the inputs across the batteries, the charging, fleet operations that can hopefully enable you to recover the maximum value for across all of our assets. And the other thing that we mentioned earlier on is about helping our knowledge and expertise can help you at an early stage in procuring those, the infrastructure, the charging, and making the right decisions to help ensure that we've got the most optimal approach to charging in those depots. So I'll stop there. I think Mike's going to summarise, and then we'll go to Q&A.
Brilliant, thanks, Leon. So just to summarise then where we are, I think to be clear, this is not a battery as a service proposition, and it's not a software as a service proposition. And what I mean by that is we share in the benefits, we also share in the risk and share in the delivery. We think that's a really important thing to help make sure that we can essentially be an agent for change and accelerate the electrification process. But the next point, the final point, a couple of points I would make is, buying just individual pieces of kit or individual solutions when we're dealing with an ecosystem and deploying them separately is not going to deliver the long-term opportunity that's in front of fleet. Just having charge points and saying, right, I now want to do some of that tariff optimization. You've got to balance that against the battery risk. You've got to balance that against the need to make sure that the vehicles get out the door with sufficient charge. So you've got to think about that triangle that I showed you earlier in terms of the balance between near-term revenues, operational need, and long-term residual value. You've got to look at those things in the round to make sure that delivers. But it is an opportunity for business growth. That's the really exciting thing here. It's not just, oh, we've got to go through a transition from one form of fuel to another form of fuel. It's actually, this is a digital transformation of a business. It's also a growth transformation of a business through new revenue streams. So that's covered everything. Hopefully that's given you quite a lot of flavour. I'm going to hand over to Nathan to just help us moderate the Q&A session. So hopefully there's been some questions. Let's over to you, Nathan, in terms of where I'm looking at the Q&A. Oh, I can look at the first one. Do you only work with certain charger hardware providers? So yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is no. And I think there's a really important point to make here that while we are part of Hitachi, we're not Hitachi Energy. We're Hitachi ZeroCarbon, and part of our growth path is to be hardware agnostic and to a large extent sometimes software agnostic as well. We will work with any partner. So if an organization has already got its own smart charging solution, we don't necessarily have to put in our smart charging solution. We just need to make sure that it provides us with the information that allows us to deliver on our commitments of charge, and that allows us to deliver on our commitments of extending the life of the battery. So we're completely open to Hitachi equipment, ABB, Heliox, whoever it is, we can integrate with that. We provide all of the interoperability capability that Leon talked through, all of the integration, and we provide that single pane of glass, which is really the key. Do we guarantee residual value of batteries? And I think the simple answer to that one is no. We're not the same as an as-a-service provider. And there's a really important point to make here, that when guarantees are provided, that places operational restrictions on the way that those batteries are utilised in their operation. It could affect the duty cycles, could affect state of health or state of charge limits. Our job is to balance first and foremost the operational need of the business with what we're doing with the batteries, and we will maximize the life of those batteries given operational requirements. The first and foremost requirement, the operational requirement is you want reliable, well-charged batteries for as long as possible. If you provide a guarantee on residual value, that means you're going to have to put constraints around the way that those batteries are used. It's as simple as that. What we're about is assuring the battery and assuring the way that the batteries are being used within warranty conditions, within operational conditions, and balancing the stress on those batteries to extend those batteries for as long as possible. It's a pretty simple mindset that we take, that an OEM, if it's providing an 8-year warranty, they're going to be pretty clear that they've probably got at least 20% contingency in the life of that battery. Our job is to make sure that you maximize the contingency for your benefit, not to the OEM or to a battery as a service provider. I absolutely respect battery as a service solutions, see there is a role for them. We just have a different view as to how that can be delivered and deployed. So we provide an assurance rather than an insurance product, and an assurance rather than an insurance service. That's a really important distinction. Do you link to transport management systems, e.g. routing systems? Yes, we do. Thank you for the question. I think we're moving forward with FIRST and people like optimise and other scheduling systems and transport management systems. Within our core smart charging capability, we provide a manual scheduling integration as a standard, but then we integrate with any other transport management systems and routing systems as well, to make sure that we can then put that into the priority list for the charging requirements. So prioritizing based on state of charge, but also based on next vehicle out is a key part of our service. Any other questions?
Got a question here, Mike. Does your system work dynamically? Does it adjust to emerging operational issues during the course of a day?
Leon?
Yes, it does. So the smart charging settings is a dynamic charging management. We will set the configuration for the known operations. If there are any emerging issues that occur during the day that we need to take account of, we can adjust those charging operations as well. but it is dynamic management, to answer the question directly.
And what are the challenges of integrating batteries with buses from different OEMs?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Yeah, what are the challenges of integrating batteries with buses from different OEMs?
That's not really what we do in a sense. So we don't buy or service the batteries separately. It tends to be that the buses and the batteries come together, and then we finance the batteries as part of that procurement. But if the question is one of, can we work with multiple OEMs with battery providers? Absolutely, and we do. We're currently working live with on EHGV vehicles, like commercial vehicles. So there's all of that side of the battery technologies. But on the bus side, we're working with Wrightbus, Yutong, and ADL. BYD batteries, Cattle batteries, etc. So that's really part of where we see real value in the longer term, is we can help organisations choose the right batteries for the right environmental and geographic conditions, and make recommendations based on which batteries tend to last longer or have greater reliability and resilience. So we don't, but we are, again, it's that agnosticism position. We will work with any battery that's available in the market, and we're looking forward to new technologies and how we can integrate those into our services as we go forward.
Yeah, if it's an integration question, then yeah, I mean, in terms of provided we can get the signals of the bus to determine, the state of charge, state of health of the battery, and then the other data that we may require, then yeah, it's fine. We can fully integrate with that bus and battery.
Are you interrogating cell level battery health through your battery management platform? Yes, great question, and actually, accessing the data is one of the bigger challenges, and it's why we do actually insist on a level of data that comes out either direct from the BMS, through the telemetry solution, or through our recommended telemetry solutions. But yes, we do go down to an individual cell level battery. Some of that has to be inferred if the battery OEM, I think with the reading between the lines, there's a good question there, that do the battery OEMs allow you access to that information? Quite a lot of this is just basic physics, so we can actually infer it through the data, and we're very good at doing that. And our solution actually goes down to cell level information wherever possible. Any other questions? Yep. What is the worst EV fleet system failure you have experienced when managing charging?
I suppose that's for me. So I suppose I would call it a failure, because I think our intervention helped. So I think with posting the charging over that Christmas period, where I think there was the most extreme temperatures they'd seen in a very long time. So temperatures were down to -20, and over the Christmas period we saw a number of chargers go offline. So, but thankfully we spotted it early. We were able to alert the hardware provider as well, but then advise the customer to switch the charging, so move the vehicles to other charge points which were operational. But so I suppose that was scary, because it was over the busy period. It was over the holiday period as well, for all parties, and we need to find a solution. But then our intervention helped the customer to move, to continue charging, but on the operational areas as well. So I think, as an aside, it was an interesting period, because I think all parties have never seen hardware function in those extreme temperatures as well. But that was probably if you put the worst experience that we've had from a charging management perspective. But again, early intervention helped to resolve that matter.
Leon, got a question here for you. Can you describe some of your SLAs with First Bus?
Yeah, good question. So, our service is built around ensuring resilience of all your operations and the availability of those buses, or the vehicles for their daily service. So the SLAs that we have with First Bus are really configured around the availability of those buses, so to make sure that they're ready for the next day's operation. And so, there will be penalties for us if we cannot ensure that there's a minimum level of the buses to go out in terms of the P1, P2 and P3. So P1 and P2s is if there's significant number of buses that are unable to go out for the next day of operation as well. So it's really, it's really designed to ensure that we manage the operations and that the customer has the maximum, all the buses available to go out to the next day's operation. So it's all configured around business operation and availability of buses.
So Anne's just come up with a really good question. Amongst your customers, how would you characterize journeys from EV reticence to EV evangelism? What key learnings and factors transform views? I'll go first, then Leon, I think you can give some colour to that as well. I think it's a terrific question, and it is one of, there's an element here that we are playing a role as educators, with hopefully without sounding too arrogant, but part of our job is to try and think as far forward as possible and think about the deployment and the operational challenges, and it is a critical part of this is we're dealing with not invented here syndrome a lot, and there is, and bus and light commercial vehicle fleets have been run in a very specific way for a long time, and vehicles have been procured in a certain way, and other pieces of infrastructure and kit have been procured in a very sort of piecemeal manner. So it has been a really I characterize it as challenging, and very much the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Even with First Group, First Group really bought into the concept, understood what we were talking about from an economies of scale and scope perspective, on a managing complexity perspective. But it's taken both the Caledonia and now the current deployment program where we've started off at the Leicester depot to really the proof of the pudding is definitely in the eating, and it's one of those where you gain confidence with clients, and thankfully Leon and his team are just awesome in terms of their customer service excellence, because you've got to get it right first time. That's probably the other part. The other characterization is when you're dealing with electrification, or as with any technology or new solutions, you've got to get it right first time, because the skepticism will only grow. You've got to prove that this is going to be beneficial, that it is, that spending a little bit of money up front on our services is actually going to save a hell of a lot of money and a lot of risk and reputational risk in the long term. Leon, anything else to add to that?
No, I mean, I'd echo that. I think in our experience shows that there are two levels to this. One of, there's the technology and the actual, implementing the charging and, the transition to electric fleets. And then there's the organizational change aspect. And somebody mentioned in the chat training earlier on. And the sort of training and education piece is key, because you're almost going through an organization change internally as well. So having, almost a devolved approach under the old ICE vehicles, where buses just come in, they're filling up, they're being, conditioned, washed, and then sent out the next day, changes, because now you've got to think about, well, buses are coming in with different state of charges. How do they plug in? Where do they plug in? When do they need to be out to the next day? How do I plug in the vehicles? Who's plugging them in? And do they understand what they're plugging in? And, do they understand how to read the charge point? And so there are many things to think about now that people didn't have to think about on the ground when you're just plugging, we've got an ICE vehicle coming through the door and then going out the gate the next day. And so that's, there's organizational change, and then education and training that goes along with that. That's one hand. And I think the other hand, looking at posting is where you've got an existing state and the client was really dealing with multiple, layers of infrastructure, vehicles and charger types. That consumes a lot of time and a lot of brain power when you're having to manage that from scratch. And so I suppose what's made us a trusted partner with them, hopefully, is that we've taken some of that pain away from them, or a lot of that pain away. And we're doing a lot of that work and analysis behind the scenes for them, and then providing that response to either them or working with, the hardware, OEMs on their behalf as well. And so in some respects, it's a journey. I think our help and support has helped guide those clients as well on their own internal journeys, if I put it that way, to the point where there's been, I suppose, enhanced understanding of how or what it takes to manage an EV operation, and also the steps and measures and resources that you need to have in place. So it's been, it's always fascinating, but those are the steps that we've observed.
Fantastic, thank you, Leon. Everybody, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate that you've got busy lives and other objectives. So we really appreciate the fact that you spent the last hour with us. We hope it's been useful and educational. Nathan, if you wouldn't mind just popping up our contact details, we're open to any more questions and any more dialogue going forward. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. Going forward, we hope this has been useful. Keep a watch out for further webinars in this series. Probably the next one, we're going to try and get our friends at First Group to talk about the finance models a little bit more, and we'll talk about our ambitions as to how we're going to take this wider to support government through finance and large organisations which are struggling to find the fees, the funds to actually electrify their fleets. Thank you for your time. We look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye bye.
Cheers.